capitalism does a very good job of getting us to forget that other people exist. Lacan has a statement about love. Love is giving what you don't have to somebody who doesn't want it. I think that's a really multiplicitous statement and can be taken in loads of different directions. But one way I sort of interpret it as is one has fantasies, especially in our era where we are so in need and we have a very commoditized love market in terms of with dating apps and stuff like that. And we imagine all of us good, desirous millennials who watch too much Bridget Jones growing up, we imagine that there's some guy who can come along or some girl who can come along and not only fulfill us in our desire, our sexual desire, our, how we want to design our life, but also they can take away our precarity. But love really, in a certain sense, as Lacan says, is giving what you don't have to somebody who doesn't want it. As soon as you come up against another person, they can never fulfill this singular fantasy that we have come up with from a very early age, unless we're like extremely lucky. But then actually, psychoanalytically, this would be the worst luck possible. Because if we got everything we wanted, we'd actually be confronted with the dark heart of the void at the heart of resistance of existence, lack itself. You'd be, this is a very sort of psychotic position, quite melancholic. It's what happens often. Well, I mean, we could talk about mourning in a separate in a way, because it's kind of quite interesting the way that Freud like delineates confrontation with lack through the process of mourning. But it would be a disaster because it's precisely the not having that keeps desire alive. So in love, the other person can never give us precisely what we want. But what they give us in not giving us what we have is the continuation of fantasy. So it's giving what you don't have. So you don't have the perfect fulfillment of this person's random fantasy that emerges at a very early age based on various life situations. And that person doesn't want it, but actually, my friend Peter has a really good, sort of description of the friendship. You have those like love the necklaces that you put together, and they like join perfectly. You don't want that. You want one that's sort of slightly askew. And then love is negotiating. We might be caught up in romance. Todd McGowan writes about this really well in Capitalism, Desire, the difference between love and romance. But, the logic of romance is the logic of sort of pretty woman, where we have this guy. It's very narcissistic. It's not about the other person at all. It's about this commodity thing that can transcendentally fill the void in our existence, like a pair of Nike trainers. But in confronting another person, and this is where love is really political, you encounter the contradictory status of their subjectivity, that they are lacking as well. And you build something through that, and you continue to enjoy fantasy precisely because there's something missing. And I think the thing is, in capitalism, everything will be commoditized eventually, unless we, can come to terms with how this is not actually good. Because as you pointed out, if you got everything you wanted, you'd be confronted with the void of your existence. And in fact, you never can get exactly what you want. And this is one of the reasons why capitalism is so persistent, because it's precisely in its failing that it succeeds. We can talk about that in a second. But yeah, but I think the issue with Death Drive is, so Death Drive, okay, so it's not necessarily death itself, but let's say a sustaining, when one so strongly holds towards the promise of oneness in fulfillment, or oneness in transcendence, or the transcendence of an object, one must always sustain lack by not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
So the trouble is, what we want to do is to direct this impulse to our benefit rather than to our detriment. I mean, there's ways of explaining that probably in like clearer
Yeah,
ways.
yeah. I mean, look, I think this is your kind of in some almost like a performative way demonstrating why we need cinema. Because you see,
Yeah,
again, this is what when I was reading this book here, right? Like, I mean, the theory stuff. Yes, I've read this everywhere. I get what you're saying, but how can we house this contradiction? How can we, in
yeah,
like in affect, in an affective sense, to use a term in cognitive
yeah,
science or in neuroscience? Help someone to confront this contradiction and house it and not trying to overcome it because it's
yeah,
insurmountable, but rather
yeah,
learn to live with it. Because one way that I see Death Drive, it's I think Adrian Johnson, he writes on this beautifully and very, I kind of like his, because he kind of like sometimes writes like an analytic philosopher. And for
yeah,
some reason,
yeah. No, it's
I
good.
still
Yeah,
like that. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
notion that it's like this almost like ontological force that just
Hmm.
keeps going in like a meaningless, almost like stupid way that it has no regard even to the subject. It's just like it just keeps going. So
Yeah.
it's just why it becomes self-destructive and
Mhm.
can be directed death drive. And perhaps this is something that has to be done communally. Maybe it certainly
Yeah,
can't. In fact, part of the fantasy of capitalism is that you can kind of control it, do it on your own,
yeah,
and you kind of privatize it in some sense.
yeah,
And can we direct it towards something more emancipatory, but not emancipatory towards like the idyllic place, because that itself
yeah,
is a
yeah,
fantasy, but rather this constant overcoming of contradiction. And I think
yeah.
I don't know. So another example like we can use here to kind of demonstrate this is I've been thinking a lot about self-help books. I mean,
Yeah,
like it's unbelievable. I work in tech, so I'm software engineer.
yeah, yeah.
Like in tech companies, they want to try and be like all hip and cool, and so they got like libraries in the office, and
Hmm.
half the books are engineering books, which is great. Of course, you need it, but the other half are like self-help, management, leadership books.
Yeah,
And then I find them so like, I mean, almost like they even kind of like obnoxiously annoying. Like some of the
yeah.
other books kind of sell them stuff to you. It's like it's so condescending, to be honest, patronizing. And I think the reason self-help books work is because they don't. Like the
No,
fact is
absolutely.
they never in fact help you. And that's
Yeah,
exactly
exactly.
why there's so much pull towards them.
No,
Um,
this is really such a trick in capitalism that's really there's a few examples that I think delineate this really well. So the dating app Hinge uses
oh,
the
you
slogan designed to be deleted. And it's like,
should.
well, if it was designed to be deleted, you wouldn't have a very good product
Yeah.
because we'd use it one. So, historically, let's just say we can argue, and capitalism has some examples where this, is the logic where you basically have this logic of competition where people are offering different products and the best product wins. So the one that does the best job at doing something, and then you have a sort of progress narrative where, right, you've completed that task, you've got everybody matched with their perfect partner, and now you do, another the next thing. But of course, we don't live in that reality. And the dating app relies on I mean, when you I don't know, I know a few people who dating apps have worked for, and actually they tended to have met very early on. I don't know if that's a trend or what, but I do sort of see like the statistic on it working is so low, and also that this is potentially the exception that proves the rule, because of course, you can roll a double six in reality. Sometimes something random happens and it works even though it shouldn't. So designed to be deleted. I mean, we know this is it's designed to keep us hooked on the process of looking for love so that we can keep investing in not only the performance and the labor of creating profiles and swiping. This is somewhere where we have loads of unrecognized labor in capitalism, is so value is extracted from us and we're not paid every time we post something online, every time we create a reel, every time we get engaged in things online. Another example I think is really interesting is one that I've stolen from a friend. So apologies to this friend, she knows who she is. But basically, her father was an NHS dentist in the UK and is in his 70s now. And when he retired, his NHS practice was only valued at £2,000, precisely because he was such a good dentist that there was no uh, market for expensive treatments to improve the teeth of the people in his local area. So if he had been a terrible dentist and had undermined everybody's health, he would have been able to sell his practice for a profit. And obviously, this is where the commercialization of healthcare in America is absolutely batshit. So a movie that I refer to in the book is the movie Brazil, which is to do with this futuristic corporation, which basically the villain of the piece is played by Robert De Niro, who is a handyman who actually goes around fixing people's broken appliances, which the corporation can never fix because it has to have a reason in this bad infinity sense to keep going. And he's an outlaw because he actually goes and fixes things. So this is really the logic of capitalism, where it kind of ends up at a certain point. So it has to destroy to maintain profit, to maintain something to fix a problem solution logic. In the problem solution logic, you always need a problem. So we were talking about death drive. So it's actually this utilitarian, bad infinity, perpetual forward movement, progress narrative that relies on destruction and death drive to. It is precisely in the denial of death drive where it's really, really toxic.